I mean, these if an American city, right? 100 drones in an American city could shut everything down.
But you got to think about that, though. The reason people don't think about that stuff is because we're spoiled. Let's be honest.
We don't deal with war. We've never had to.
If they had to live over in Syria, they would grasp the concept of war.
Those people understand that kind of stuff.
They go to sleep not knowing they're going to wake up.
Yeah. There was a song I did like years and years ago, and I was just trying to put people in this perspective. Like, what would you do if like you lived in a war ravaged city and like you had to like listen for things like bombs going off and listen for alarms and your house got blew up and you see the mangled remains of your family members or something. You would not, like, your entire way of processing life would be completely different.
Yeah.
But we don't see that here. No. And, people, I mean, just for the simple act of, I guess it wasn't a simple act, but like with the Japanese, and Pearl Harbor happened. Okay, I understand Pearl Harbor. That was a messed up thing to do. I would never say that the Japanese were right for that.
Right.
But it also isn't right to drop 2 atomic weapons on people. Yeah. Like, and to the point in where, I was just watching something about that the other day.
Think how many people that don't agree with the wars that we're in.
Yeah.
So imagine now people. You just drop bombs on people that probably don't even agree with the war that they're fighting against your own people. It's insanity.
Yeah, it's absolutely insanity. And but I can't help but to think that all this warmongering and stuff that exists in the world still has a religious root. Because at the end of the day, there are people, I forget, there's a certain name for, I forget what they're called, but it's a certain type of person whose like main interest is to bring about the end of the world. And if you're religious, and definitely come out of Judeo-Christian situation, then you have Christianity and Islam. I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure the Jewish people don't really have this idea of that there's some Armageddon awaiting. But that's a Christian concept, The Book of Revelation, that's a New Testament thing. The New Testament has always baffled me because I always, you learn that, the Old Testament is pretty much old Hebrew scriptures, it's the scriptures of the Jewish people. And then somebody just came with this other stuff and just pasted it on to your book. So it's like if you wrote a book and you wrote a specific into it or whatever, and then somebody came along and was like, look, that's not actually how your book ends. This is actually how it ends. And then you're sitting there like, no, that's not that's not my idea at all.
Yeah.
So Christianity and Islam have kind of taken this story, that Abraham is a very important, person in all of those. So they've taken this story that has to do with all these people who, I mean, these days, I don't even know if any of these people existed. Like, I just, there's people throughout history have graves and people talk about them and other stuff. But a lot of these people, like, nobody ever records their life or anything. Like,
well, I mean, history's written by the conqueror.
It really is.
So how much do we trust of history? That's the thing. You go back and you read books and you read all these things, but really in reality, who's written all the scriptures? Who's written all the, it's not like we allow, the American Indians, we don't allow their history.
No.
So
I remember this guy I used to work with, and we got into some religious talk. I used to work at the auction over there, Garden Spot.
Okay, yeah.
And we'd be riding around in vans, driving cars and stuff. So I'm in there pretty much with all like older men, So me, I'm kind of this anomaly. And this was kind of like the beginning of me saying openly things that people didn't find popular.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a guy, and we got into it. He said, well, who wrote, I asked him, I said, who wrote the Bible? He said, God did. I said, look, I'm not concerned with your belief of who wrote or I want to know who was the person who were the people responsible for compiling these texts, who wrote these texts,
right?
Because realistically, people don't even really know these things. Like,
it's an interpretation of who wrote it down. I mean, everybody has a different interpretation.
Like when they say the book of Mark or the book of Matthew, those weren't written by Matthew and Mark. Those were written by people who wrote in a particular perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, actually, when you read it, this is why it's so amazing. But the Gospels contradict themselves. There's things that happen in somebody's recollection of the events of Jesus's demise that somebody else didn't record. And sometimes they talk about like when he goes, I forget exactly how it goes, but like little stuff like, who was there who witnessed that Jesus's tomb was empty. And that's that story differs between who you ask. So I was more interested in who compiled this thing, who got these stories and said, okay, this is what we're going to go with, and this is what we're going to exclude.
Yeah,
because there's a whole bunch of apocryphal texts that are things that people, that the church decided not to put in the canon. So there's all this stuff. Some people say that some of it is inspired. What do you mean the inspired word of God? Like, if all of this is the inspired word of God, then wouldn't all of it be there? You just like, oh, I know that's the inspired word of God, but we're not going to put that stuff in there. We're just going to kind of tuck that away. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense. There's no part of that makes me think that that's how it went down. It's just, in time, it wasn't until I got further education about the different councils that happened in the earlier church and their selection processes and how books got into the Bible. These were things that most people didn't spend time learning about. I know that it's not like a hidden thing, definitely in the age of the internet and stuff, but if you don't care, there's a question that atheists ask that is always interesting to me. And they always ask, they say, do you care if what you believe is true? And I found in many cases, most Christians don't really care if it's true or not. Right. They just say, I have faith that it is. And I said, well, you can have faith about all things.
Absolutely.
All things can, the way I always put it to people is, when I play basketball, I know that I can make a layup because I've made a layup before. I've seen myself do it. I have a recollection of the fact that I can make a layup. That's knowledge. Now, when I take any shot, I don't know that any of them are going in. I take them on faith pretty much. I have belief that the shot is going in, and that's what I do. That's why there's a fundamental, distinct difference between belief and knowledge. They're not the same things. And religion is kind of about mistaking belief for knowledge. They say, well, I heard countless people say, oh, well, I know that God is real. I know that there's... You mean you believe that?
Right.
You can't really demonstrate. I say, well, can you demonstrate to me how?
Have you shook hands lately?
Yeah, people say wild stuff to you, and then they're like, well, did you look at like the trees? You see the formations of animals, and do you see how intricate this is? God must be real. And to me, I know you're talking about a character in a book. I do, I actually have beliefs that say that there is something that created all of this.
Yeah.
But I know that we're not talking about the same thing. My dad always thinks I'm splitting hairs, but it's like, no, God, as these people talk about it, is a distinct character in a book. He has a lineage of, he chose a people. He told them to kill certain people. He brought people out of Egypt. He's a character. What I'm talking about isn't a character. It's just, it is everything. You know, it is the act of creation in itself. It's what it's the fundamental part of all things. And what I tried to get into at one point in time, the more spiritual part of my life, is in my best frame of mind, I can see that essential part of a person, the part of them that is me. Because that's really, I used religion almost as a learning tool. In many, I would learn from, well, what are the Christians saying? What are the Hindus saying? What are these people over here saying? What are these Jainists saying? And what I would do is I would just say, okay, well, what are the things that they all seem to say, as opposed to their differences in their dogmas. And what I came to is that, like, they're all pretty much trying to talk about the uniformity of all things, the fact that there's a connection in all things. And it's not just the spiritual aspect, but from a scientific standpoint, it only makes sense that everything is made at least of the same stuff. There's all this stuff, you know what I mean? Like so we see division, like we were talking about, division is perceptual. When you can look at the world and you can bring things in instead of trying to push things away, the world is heaven. But as soon as you start trying to push things away, you start living in hell. I always think of, that's the way the Buddhists look at heaven and hell, is that those are mentalities, that they're states of mind. And that's what I really cling to, that I've experienced heaven in times where I can see the worth and of everything, and I can bring that into me. But I also know what it is to be in that restricted mind. That's what I think that's what in Zoroastrianism. That's a really obscure thing a lot of people don't know about. If you ever want to learn something interesting, learn about Zoroastrianism, because it had a distinct effect on Christianity.
Huh. I never heard of it.
Yeah, Zoroastrianism. It was actually like the ancient religion of Persia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, interesting. That's what before all that became Islamic. These days I think they call them the Parsi religion or something like that, because they're still practicing Zoroastrians. But once Islam took over, like, a lot of people fled, went to India and stuff like that.
Okay.
But Zoroastrianism, like, they introduced the concept of like a dualistic thing going on, where there's like this good God and then there's like this devil. Their God is named Ahura Mazda. Mazdas are named
car?
Yeah, for Ahura Mazda.
Huh.
A lot, so people, you see this stuff, but you don't really even know. You know what I mean? Like, and then I think their devil, I think it was Angramanu. And that's like their devil character. He's the adversary. Because in reality, the Jews like didn't even talk about anything. In the Bible, Lucifer is like God's right hand man. He's like his buddy. Like,
right?
Like
wasn't he shunned to hell?
No, because
he did something bad or something.
The story is that at some point in time, Lucifer wanted to be as great as God. So God was like, he pretty much banished him to earth. And I don't even know where the whole concept of, like, hell is a weird thing. When you start to learn about it, you're like, they don't even really define this well. Like, but it's like, so I guess there was some pit, did he, it's almost kind of like Lucifer, like, came to Earth and was like, all right, we need a place to put all the people we get. Like, we need to make hell. Like, they did a construction job or something and made hell. It's just like, we need more fire in here. We got to torture people down here. Like, but, Zoroastrianism was, it predated,
any religion or
not any religion. I think maybe the old. See, that's the thing. The more you go back into history, the more obscure you see that people have always been trying to form these thoughts, and about what's going on here. Did something create us? Why do I do bad things? Why? Like, all these questions have always made their way into people's belief structures. But yeah, it's older than Christianity by far. Like, it was an influence. It actually ended up influencing Christianity in a variety of different ways. In the Bible, there's even a guy who is a Zoroastrian. There's a guy who's a Zoroastrian who is tasked with rebuilding this temple. I forget exactly who it was. It might have been Cyrus, maybe. But he was tasked with rebuilding this temple, and I was like, wait, God told a dude from another religion to do that, like to reconstruct a temple for him. It's like, wait a second, why is there this overlap? And that's because it was such a prevalent part of that earlier world. These things blend eventually. Those thoughts, as soon as you get wind of another thought, it makes a way into your mentality. I think that's why they tried to stress at certain parts in the Old Testament. They're like, there's rules. Like, you see somebody practicing something else, kill him. And then they say even more, don't even just kill him. Kill the people who live in his town. You know what I mean? Like, that's how
it's like barbaric.
It's more like, it's the fact that these are supposedly God's people.
Yeah.
There's this story where I'm pretty sure it was Moses. Moses was like, in reality, Moses was like a terrorist.
He's a gangster.
Like, he was
cartel.
He was a gangster. He worked for the biggest gangster, who was God. God was like the Godfather. Like, he was, he was sending him to break knuckles and stuff. He would break legs and worse. Because in this story, there's this one where Moses, I forget exactly what happened, but I think something had happened, to like the women that the Israelites were traveling with. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And God is like, look, like, there's going to be these girls who are going to this party, or it was like a festival or something. And he's like, they're going to be dressed real good and stuff like that. And he's like, so what y'all need to do is go hide like in the bushes. And when they come, just take them and just like, they're, bring them back, they're yours, but that sounds crazy, but that's not an anomaly in this story. Like, there's always this, take the people as slaves, take the women as your sex slaves, you know what I mean? Like, that, like, they, and they have to do what you say, like,
yeah.
And it's like, man, this guy, God, if anybody ever did like a psychological evaluation of God, it'd be like, this person is a madman. This person is easily like Hitler. Hitler is nowhere near on this level of barbarism.
So you just take a information down. You write a bunch of things out that he did, right? And then you change the name and you give that to psychologists and say, describe this person.
There was a book. I read one time, and there was a test that it gave, and it was like, this person massacred 40,000 people and did this over because two people from different tribes got married and stuff. And they like listed, like, it was like multiple choice. It was a couple of questions, and like A, B, C, and D would be like different, like world, like boogeymen. It'd be Hitler, or Leopold the Fourth or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and at the end of the test, you come to realize it's like, look, there was none of these people. All of these things were done by the Christian God. Like, it's not, so it's easier to say, oh, well, Hitler would do something like that. But you worship something that is a mass murderer. Like, that kill all kinds of people, did weird things. He impregnated a teenager.
Right.
It's like, come on now. Like, where's your, Christians often ask me, they say, without the Bible, where's your moral compass? And I'm like, if you read the Bible and are able to twist it in a way where it's moral to have slaves and to kill people and to just be just vile, then I would say you have no moral compass.
So think of like, as this last couple minutes of this conversation, I'm thinking back all the times I've been to church, right? And all the times I've talked to people that go to church that I know. And we've never had conversations about this part of the Bible.
No.
So it's like anything else. They give you the good without giving you the bad. We just want to praise the good. We don't want to talk about the bad part of it.
No.
Which is craziness.
They don't want to talk. It's kind of like, but that's the whole thing here. The whole thing is that we live in this world that tries to make things nice and neat. And they're like,
right.
This is a good person. This is a bad person. This, and then when you inspect these supposed good people or bad people, you start to see that it's not so clear cut like that. Right. Good and bad people, that's pretty much a fairy tale. Like, that's a child's tale. There are people who do good things, and there's people, me myself, I've done good things, I've done horrible things.
Right.
You know what I mean? Things that, is not on no level of killing nobody or doing, stuff to people, against their will and stuff. But it's like, I've done things. At times I've done things and really had to really sit with myself and say, like, am I a bad person? Like, and I think none of us are free of that.
No, absolutely not.
The thing is if you can convince a world full of people that they're bad people, well, or on the other hand, these good, perfect people, I mean, it's all childishness. It's not real.
It's almost like religious privilege.
It is a privilege.
Right? So,
there's a real privilege.
So if you're a Christian, you're the top of the heap, yeah. Right? And everybody below you is nothing.
You get to question my morality because I don't believe what you believe. And that is not civilized in any way, shape, or form. There's no way that you can even pretend it to be. Right. It's not civilized to say, oh, you're different than me? Well, I'm better than you.
Right.
That's kid stuff. You're supposed to learn more than that as a child.
Right. You think in the Bible they would teach you that everybody is equal, and that that's the thing. I never read the Bible, so my perception of what's in the Bible, that it's about because of hearing over the years that all the good stuff, right? So my perception of never reading the Bible is that, it preaches everybody's equal, and, you should never look down on people. And in reality of what it teaches, or not teaches, but what's in there is different.
They do say stuff like that. And that's where so many people are confused. Like, they do say stuff. They'll be like, yeah, everybody's equal. But if you see homosexuals, you're supposed to stone them. You know what I mean? So they do say those things, but then they contradict it in so many different ways that you're not going to see the contradiction. You're going to learn that part that gets you hooked in believing that it's perfect, because everybody's like, oh, of course it's perfect. They said love your brother and love. Yes, it does say that, but it also details the idea that, like, God is pretty much like some sort of mob boss, and he's like killing people if they don't worship him, and like, Like they don't talk about
He's
those
the original
things.
gangster.
He is. He really is. And I know that. And there's a lot of people say, "Oh man, that's so." A lot of people right now, if you're listening, like you going to hell for even suggesting something like that. But like one of my favorite comedians, Eddie Griffin said, he said Christians like to tell you this, you going to hell. He said, how the hell do you know? Who told you? Like God came down, was like, hey, tell him he going to hell. Yeah. He going to hell. It's like, no, man, I don't believe in those types of things, but that doesn't mean that we can't build with each other as human beings. The only way that we don't is if your bias gets in the way. If your religion and your unsubstantiated beliefs get in the way of you building with me or other people as human beings outside of the realm of religion and things that no one can substantiate. So, it has to be, we got a lot of work to do as people.
Absolutely.
No, we got a lot of work to do. And the only reason why I even wanted to begin this conversation with Christians is out of a love for them and out of a want to have a relationship with them on a non-superficial level. I shouldn't, I don't want to harp all day on how I think the Bible is immoral and things like that. I'd much rather find our commonality and build on that. But in many ways I can't, because as soon as you entertain or you interject the fact that I can't be trustworthy or I can't be of any value to you, then we can't go anywhere.
Right.
And to me, that is one of the best examples of division.
It has to be a reciprocating conversation.
It has to be.
If I'm willing to put value on what you have to say, you have to put value on what I have to say.
You don't have to believe nothing that I say.
But at least you have to engage in the conversation and be respectful of that person. If you're going to say, no matter what you say, I don't believe because you're not Christian, how do we get anywhere?
We got to have an intelligent conversation.
Yeah.
And you have to be intellectually honest enough in order to say, hey, you have a point there. Instead of trying to have this emotional response to, well, you said, how dare you say that, something like that about David, that he was cutting off foreskins. It happened. Right. You know what I mean? Like, and then you just look kind of dumb if you act like it's not happening, and then some dude who doesn't even believe it tells you about it.
But some people don't want to have that conversation because the problem is you're going to bring up things they can't explain.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Nobody wants... being a person who knew what it was like, there was a time in my life in that transitional stage when I went from considering myself a Christian to not considering myself a Christian. I know what it is to have a hollowness where there was once a faith.
Yeah.
And nobody wants that.
Right.
Because it's not easy. It's like to me it's like boot camp or something. Like it's a very hard place to be at, to start trying to say, okay, well, what is my conception of what's going on here? Not what somebody is just dictating to me, but what am I making of all of this? Because people say a million things, but you have to be able to sift through it and be able to say, well, this is actually what I believe and not so much this other thing.
Well, what you believe in it a lot of times affects your train of thought and your decision making.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, and you're in a transition where you don't know what you believe in, that you start questioning everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing, I can't say the number one thing, but one of the things that I'm the most kind of disgusted at myself about is when I was a Christian, I learned to dehumanize homosexual people to the point where it was like, it's just all bad and there's no good that can come from them and all of this. And I learned this and I had a fear of them. I remember there was a time where my my parents, we went to, I want to say Boston. And it was me and my family, my cousins were there and stuff like that. We went to this hotel. There was a group of homosexuals. I forget exactly what they were. I don't know their group or anything, but I remember we all went to the pool and they were down there and stuff like that. And one of them tried to speak to my cousin. And I remember we got rushed out of the pool, and eventually we actually left that hotel, got a refund and went to this other hotel just because they were there and just because one had said that in their minds they must have made a fantasy where he was trying to like seduce my cousin or something. And it's like growing up in that element.
You know, if you're a guy and another guy's gay, he's got to want you.
He
wants every guy. It's not just one or the other. He has most people really like have this inflated like version of themselves. Like, man, I'm hot. Like, like this. Who doesn't want this right here? Like, I know that this guy's over here wanting this. It's like they probably ain't even concerned with you. Like, and that's the thing about it. I was very disgusted. At the fact that it took me a really long time in order to actually hang out with gay people and to be around them, to form relationships where I would be like, you know what? Like, I'm offended at the fact that you would think that this person is a bad person just because of their sexual orientation. Like, and I became very angry about that because I learned that bias somewhere. I learned that bias from that book. I think that's the way, I don't know. So much of we're too busy not minding our own business and letting people be people, And I don't know if that comes from religion or something else, but I think that's a lot of that. And the fear thing, like you said, you're fearful, right? And I think that comes from the religion because, you're instilled with fear at the beginning. Yeah. Right? So you're already fearful at a young age. If you don't do this, this is going to happen. And that just continues as you get older. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where you're fearful of something you don't know.
Absolutely.
And it's easier to condemn than it is to learn.
Way easier. And in this world, you're going to find such a wide array of people that that's not a good philosophy for how to live. Because if I'm always coming up against these people and being afraid of them because they differ from me in some way, well, I'll be afraid of the entire world. Because
it's knowledge lost.
I mean, how many people... I can't help but to wonder how many relationships and with people I couldn't have simply because, there's no time where I can actually think about where I was actually talking to like a Hindu person or something like, and trying to build a real relationship with them. Yeah. And that's not just on the Christian end. That goes for anybody who has this exclusionary way of dealing with life to the point where it's like, if they don't believe what you believe, you should not associate with them.
See, like nowadays, and maybe I was always this way, but it's just more nowadays. But like I want to find people like that. I want to talk to people. I enjoy, like a lot of times when I watch things on YouTube or interviews and stuff, I want to watch things that are interviewing people that live in different countries, their perspective.
It's why it's why I'm addicted to documentaries, because they let me see aspects of life that are different to me.
Right, different.
And not even, sometimes inconceivable.
Right.
Sometimes things like, sometimes people live ways and live in certain circumstances that are inconceivable to me. And my goal is to,
well, it's kind of like, though, what we were talking about earlier is like, imagine somebody in the Amazon. Our lifestyle is inconceivable to them.
Inconceivable to them. I watched this one documentary about when the Inuit people, people call Eskimos, but when the Inuit people first came into contact with like Westerners, and they had actually had like, there was somebody who had like made like a prophecy in their like past that said like there's gonna be like some like pale looking people coming one day, and they're gonna take you to a world that is completely outside of your ability to understand. Like, and that happened. And the way that they framed it, like they framed it in the sense, I remember there was this one shot taken inside. It was taken inside of a car, and it was going down the street, and I think it was like New York City, and it really gave you this idea of like what if this was the first time you saw this and you didn't know it existed, and you were living out in like the, you know, maybe not the wilds, because I'm sure they had their civilization, but like if you didn't think that, and if you didn't know of any of this, and then somebody brought you here, it's the same thing as if like you got abducted and went to a different planet.
Right.
It'd be the exact same thing. So it's like they don't have a conception of this. We don't have a great we have hardly no conception of anything that has to do with people who are still integrated with nature.
Right.
We're so far removed from it that we think it's normal.
Hunting for their own food every night, fishing, that kind of stuff, you know.
It's that kind of stuff that we actually yearn for. We yearn, when we talk about freedom, we're talking about, I woke up this morning and I did exactly what I wanted to do and needed to do to survive. And we don't know anything about that. We've been largely just kind of pacified into giving that responsibility off to other people. Right. And now we have to venture into nature. Yeah. We don't live in it. We venture into it. You know, I'll go on a hike or something or a walk. I'm like, oh, it feels good getting back into nature. There was a time where it's just like, I live in nature. Like I'm a part of nature.
Did you ever hear Killer Mike?
Yeah.
Dude, that guy, I was listening to him one time, and it was a short snippet, but he's like, you guys are out here talking about revolution. What are you going to do? You're going to revolt, and then what are you going to eat? You can't even cook your own. You can't grow your own food. We gotta be ready. We gotta learn how to farm, how to do all these things. You can't even get anywhere near revolution until that happens. Yeah. You know? And
that's the thing. I mean, we've largely removed ourselves from nature, and even that can be reflected in our religions. Instead of you having this connection with nature and all kinds and creation and kind of a uniformity and a universal type of connection, you have this situation now where you've made God this thing outside of you, and it's not, it's pretty much just this big person, who was powerful. And in his power, like they show the way that they conceive God's power through his acts. God's power is seen, it's pretty much seen like how we view the world. Whoever can kill the most people is the most powerful.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like or money.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And even now now you got people convinced that God needs money.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you say, hey, you need to make an offering.
Yeah.
Yeah. God was talking about animal offerings and things. Like people are now they're like, oh man, God can really use these dollars. Like,
I see these pastors on TV. What's that one guy, Olstein or whatever?
Oh yeah, Joel Osteen.
Yeah, like he's driving around in like, Mercedes Benz and all this stuff, and like I'm thinking he's got like this big huge church. I'm like, how many homeless people you fit in that church? Like how many all that money that you're spending on your Mercedes? How many people could you have fed with that money? And I don't get that whole thing.
When I drive past churches now, I used to look at them like they were like these holy places. Like every time like I go in churches now, I just do stuff to kind of not to be disrespectful, but to show that I don't have to view this the way that everybody does.
Yeah.
Like I'll go into church with a hat on, and people say, "Well, you're not supposed to do that."
I forgot about that.
Yeah, you're not supposed to have a hat on, and I'm like, I do it to show a person that I don't have to believe what you believe.
Yeah.
I don't believe I'm doing anything wrong right now. So
so who's to say that your perception is wrong?
Yeah, how can you? And really, what I find is now, I think, and it's funny because people sometimes they'll make little comments. They're like, well, you're supposed to take your hat off and you come into the Church of God.
Now you say that, my grandfather yelling at me about that stuff.
Yeah.
Take your hat when you came in the house.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
My mom, she still doesn't like people wearing hats at the table.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always got to wear a hat because I'm balding. You know what I mean? I got a hat on all the time. I don't need you looking at my baldness. So I always got a hat on. But yeah, I think, I don't know about what you think, but that might be a good place, to try to wrap it up.
But yeah, it was pretty good. Thank you for coming on and doing this with me.
No, definitely. I enjoyed it.
It was fun. So
it is fun, and I think now you can see that it can be a learning thing for you, because that's really what it is. It's about these people coming on in your podcast, educating you, and then you being able to educate other people with your experience. So that's what's awesome about podcasting.
I think I love different perspectives. You don't always have to agree with my perspective, but when we have good conversation about different perspectives, that's very productive. It's
productive because now it makes us think about what we truthfully believe as opposed to, it's easy. So sometimes, you get some information and change your whole perspective on
Absolutely.
it. To something like cryptocurrency or something. Yeah. That was something that I had no conception of like a year ago.
Yeah.
I didn't, and now it's becoming something that continues to draw me to the point where I could see where eventually I'll, get into it.
We'll have to get you there.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun to learn,
Well, it's and that's just another thing to learn. That's why we have conversations.
That's why we have them. That's why we can't be afraid to have the conversations.
Absolutely.
The conversations are the most important in keeping us humanized.
And you don't always have to agree with the person either.
Never. I like talking sometimes to people who are opposed.
Absolutely.
So that you can make your points and I can
as long as it's constructive.
And it's constructive.
Yeah.
And usually it's about being respectful.
And it's funny when you have a constructive one with different viewpoints, because at the end of it, you usually come close to almost agreeing. You know what I mean?
You find that there are things you agree on.
Right.
You may not agree on everything, but very basic concepts you do agree with. And that's the key, really, to the world. Right. You have to figure out that there are people who differ from you, but are also the same.
The building blocks are the same.
Yeah.
And you just got to figure out how to get those building blocks more important.
I remember somebody said, people just want a place to lay their head and food to put in their children's stomach.
Yeah.
And that's really, that's at the core of it,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man.
All right.
That's it.
All right. Thanks, man.
See ya.